Hello, your friendly neighborhood host, JT Wheatley here again, back for another episode of the History of Comic Books podcast, this time with the third and final episode of the history of Marvel Comics. When we last left off, Marvel Comics was going into the 90s with a brilliant new crop of artists and writers from Todd McFarlane and Rob Liefeld. However, trouble started brewing as these new young artists were ones that started to make a name for themselves. Todd McFarlane finally ended his frustration with Marvel when he left the company altogether and went to Malibu Comics for financing of his own comic. Meanwhile, X-Force #1 was released in August 1991 by Fabian Nicieza and Rob Liefeld to record-breaking sales of 5 million, thanks in large part to variant cover gimmick in which each comic was bagged with a different collectible card, 5 in all. With all this success, Marvel went public, with most of the money going to Ron Perlman. X-Men #1 then came out on August of 1991 by Chris Claremont and Jim Lee with multiple variant covers that, when put together, formed one large cover, resulting in 8.1 million copies sold and Marvel stock climbed to $40 a share. However, this new success led to Rob Liefeld and Jim Lee to meet with Todd McFarlane and Malibu Comics near Central Park about forming their own comic book line. They then went back to Terry Stewart for Marvel's counteroffer, and after leaving unsatisfied, managed to get artist Mark Silvestri to come along as well. As a result, Marvel's stock dropped on February 17, 1992, when the young artists they had promoted for so long left, along with poor financing in general. This left the company scrambling, even as a new 2099 line had started up, which took place in the future, featuring futuristic versions of classic Marvel characters like Spider-Man and Dr. Doom. Thankfully, Marvel was being helped by its highly successful toy line at Toy Biz and its executive, Avi Arad. The son of Holocaust survivors and an Israeli native, he served in the IDF fighting in the Six-Day War where he was wounded. Arad grew up reading Superman and Spider-Man comics, which had been translated into Hebrew. He later moved to the United States, where he worked his way through college to get his BBA at Hofstra University, where he eventually became an executive at Toy Biz, working alongside co-owner and fellow Israeli-American Isaac Perlmutter. Despite the stock loss, Bill Bevins, Perlman's #2 man at McAndrews, bought Flair, the trading card company, for $265 million. Then on June 6, 1992, Martin Goodman, the founder of Marvel Comics, died at his home in Palm Beach, Florida, at the age of 84. He was given little fanfare or mention in the comics or the company he started so many decades ago. Meanwhile, Image Comics, the new company formed by McFarlane, Lee, and Liefeld, was breaking sales records with Spawn, Wildcats, and Youngblood, leading to Marvel and DC being shut out of the top 5 in sales for the first time in February of 1993. So successful was Image, Chris Claremont would end up getting over his previous frustrations working with Jim Lee to work on his series Wildcats, where he introduced his own character, the Huntsman. Marvel, in desperation, started trying more outlandish events, like bringing Elektra back to life without Frank Miller's approval in Daredevil. Meanwhile, Scott Lobel, the current writer of Alpha Flight, Marvel's Canadian superhero team, made a significant social move for Marvel by having North Star come out as gay in issue number 106 in 1992. Lobel, who was openly gay himself, had been wanting to make this move for years, and North Star was a natural choice. John Byrne, who wrote Alpha Flight during the 80s, hinted at North Star's sexuality, but couldn't say it outright due to the CCA restrictions and Jim Shooter's own policy against openly gay characters. Bill Mantlo even tried to make him HIV positive at one point, but that was nixed. The news about Alpha Flight number 106 was huge, with the issue selling out, but also controversial, with upper management downplaying the event for years afterwards. Nevertheless, in astonishing X-Men number 51, in June of 2012, North Star would eventually marry his fiancée Kyle Jendo, depicting the first same-sex marriage in a mainstream comic book. At the time, though, Bill Bevins wanted a merchandising empire with Marvel and felt such controversial moves would have a negative impact. Thus, he assumed 46% interest in Toy Biz for a master license of Marvel and $7 million in capital. As part of this deal, Avi Arad started developing Marvel film and TV properties, which soon included the X-Men animated series, which premiered on October 31st, 1992 on the Fox network. A remarkably faithful cartoon that stuck to the series' continuity along with the long-form storytelling, it would run for 76 episodes till September 20th, 1997. Most notably, it stuck with the comic themes of bigotry and racial prejudice, producing numerous intelligent stories, and today ranks as one of the best American cartoons ever produced. With this cartoon, Marvel established Marvel Films as a brand, and one Avi Arad had every intention of protecting. Reportedly, he bought Roger Corman's cheap Fantastic Four film with the intention of destroying it, considering it hazardous to the brand. Sorry, Mr. Arad, thanks to YouTube, everyone can still see this movie, which, quite frankly, is the most faithful adaptation of the comic book to date. Granted, Corman reportedly just made the film to keep the rights, knowing he would make more money when he sold the license back to Marvel. His autobiography is titled, How I Made 10,000 Movies and Never Lost a Dime. In 1994, Marvels was released by Kurt Busiek and Alex Ross, a tribute to the Marvel Universe history. The story takes the perspective of Phil Sheldon, a reporter for the Daily Bugle who follows the superhero phenomenon from the first appearance to the Human Torch and Namor to Spider-Man. The genius of using his perspective is that you truly see how marvelous these characters are, from a human's perspective. For example, when Galactus attacks New York, Phil feels like an ant to the actions of gods. Thanks to Busiek's faithful writing and Ross's gorgeous, realistic art, it remains one of the finest Marvel miniseries ever produced. Despite this excellent comic, sales still dropped 36% that year. With the comics in free fall, Fabian Nicieza offered a restructuring the editorial staff, but the result was so haphazard Tom DeFalco left the company altogether. Even worse, the now infamous Clone Saga began in Spider-Man books. The less said about that event, the better. Despite all this turmoil, Marvel bought the Panini sticker and magazine company for $158 million, and then bought Malibu Comics, from which Image Comics had long since broken free. Despite this spending spree, Marvel instituted its first layoff since 1957, a true sign of trouble brewing. Marvel still kept buying, though, acquiring Heroes World on December 28, 1994, a comic book store chain with the intention of using it as their distribution network, along with Skybox, a trading card company, for $150 million. However, Marvel soon discovered Heroes World didn't have the infrastructure to support their business. With sales still declining, Marvel decided to bring back Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld to reboot Captain America, Iron Man, Fantastic Four, and the Avengers with the Heroes Reborn event in the 1996-1997, which was done with Barb Harris as editor-in-chief. All the while, Stan Lee had become a full-time celebrity, complete with a cameo in the movies The Mallrats. However, by January 3rd and 4th of 1995, Marvel had lost $49 million and resulted in layoffs of 275 employees. The Excelsior line was soon abandoned, while the Spider-Man movie, which was supposed to be directed by James Cameron, languished for years. Nevertheless, Marvel sold a chunk of their stake to Toy Biz to start Marvel Studios. Meanwhile, the horrible and overly long Clone Saga and the Spider-Man books started to ruin the sales, with many in the industry mocking Marvel as a joke in the comic books world. Nevertheless, Howard the Duck returned in the Spider-Man Team-Up number 5 before an extended guest appearance run in Generation X, a new version of the New Mutants comic book. Finally, all of these bad financial moves caught up with Marvel, and the company filed for bankruptcy in 1996. With no distribution network, Marvel joined Diamond Distribution and the rest of the industry and canceled Heroes Reborn, firing Rob Liefeld outright when he refused to accept the pay cut. In response, Liefeld tried to do a Captain America ripoff, first trying to license Fighting American from Joe Simon, but couldn't agree on a price. He then tried to create his own character, Agent America, but Simon threatened to sue him over it, so Liefeld finally reached a licensing agreement for the Fighting American. Then Marvel threatened to sue him over that character, which was settled when he agreed not to let the character throw his shield like a weapon as Captain America does. During all this time, Liefeld's relationship with his fellow Image creators soured, and he was forced out of the company. To keep Marvel afloat, Toy Biz bought out some of the company's debt, and when asked who should help revive the comics, Gerard Shamus of Weird Magazine recommended Joe Quesada and Jim Paolimenti, former freelance artists who worked at Marvel, DC, and Valiant before forming their own company, Event Comics, back in 1994, with their own comic creation, Ash. In 1998, Event was contracted to do Marvel Knights with the intention of reviving Daredevil, Inhumans, Black Panther, and The Punisher. Also, The Heroes Return was launched, heralding the end of Heroes Reborn and the return of these characters to the regular Marvel fold. As for the business side, Marvel was having trouble finding buyers due to its complicating licensing deals. Despite that, on September 27, 1998, the company emerged from bankruptcy when Marvel and Toy Biz merged into Marvel Enterprises. Things were looking up across the board for Marvel as Blade debuted in cinemas on August 21, 1988, grossing $131.2 million to a $45 million budget, becoming Marvel's first successful film adaptation. Marv Wolfman, who created Blade in comics back in Tomb of Dracula number 10 on July of 1973 with Gene Colan, would sue Marvel but could not get none of his peers to help, as at this point Marvel had clearly locked away all the rights with their contracts. Meanwhile, Joe Quesada managed to get acclaimed filmmaker and comic book fan Kevin Smith to write the relaunched Daredevil at Marvel Knights, with Quesada himself handling the art, while Grant Morrison created a new Marvel Boy with artist J.G. Jones in 2000. In 2001, Morrison would team with artist Frank Quitely to revive the X-Men and New X-Men comic book series. All the while, Stan Lee quietly negotiated a new pay raise and salary while the company fired other executives to save money. Marvel then dubbed Flair and Skybox for $26 million and acquired the film rights to Spider-Man back thanks to a legal loophole in the original contract, along with $10 million. However, Joe Simon, the co-creator of Captain America, decided to sue when the copyright went up again while Chris Claremont returned to the X-Men. Bill Jemas, the former president of Flair, was then named the new president of Marvel and set out to create the Ultimate line, which would reboot all of the Marvel characters while maintaining the original line, since this would be a separate one. On March of 2002, Ultimates, the Ultimate line version of the Avengers, debuted by Mark Millar and Brian Hitch and took a decidedly political tone. Most significant, though, it reimagines Nick Fury as a black man who looked just like the actor Samuel L. Jackson. This was a deliberate move by Miller and Hitch and will have huge ramifications later. The X-Men movie came out on July 14, 2000, a huge success, eventually grossing $293.3 million worldwide against a $75 million budget and launching the X-Men film franchise. Back on the comics front, thanks to the success of Marvel Knights, Joe Quesada was named editor-in-chief of all of Marvel Comics and decided to clean house. He quickly set up a good cop, bad cop contrast with President Bill Jemas, whose outrageous statements and micromanaging had rubbed more than a few people the wrong way. At this point, while getting more money than ever from Marvel, Stan Lee was nothing more than a figurehead and outsider. He was soon making a name for himself, though, in cameos in film. He briefly appeared in the X-Men film, but with no lines. And TV, and would eventually sue Marvel for a larger share of the money. They ultimately settled for $10 million and a guaranteed annual salary. As for the movies, Marvel truly broke through on May 3, 2002, when the long-gestating Spider-Man movie was finally released to record-breaking box office, eventually grossing $821.7 million worldwide against a $139 million budget. Directed by Sam Raimi and starring Tobey Maguire as Peter Parker's Spider-Man, it would garner huge fan and critical acclaim, along with, of course, a sequel in 2004, Spider-Man 2, to even more acclaim, with some still calling it one of the best comic book movies ever made. Of course, there was also Spider-Man 3 in 2007, which, while still financially successful, was felt as a letdown to the fans and critics alike. Nevertheless, Marvel was in the movies big time, and by 2008, they were going to change the industry. Back on the comics front, though, with the success of trade paperbacks, Marvel instituted a mandate that all stories had to be 4 to 6 issues run to make them easily collected. It also created the Max line, which was a part of a larger move of Marvel leaving the comic books code authority altogether and developing their own in-house code, something that would finally bring about the death of the hated CCA. The Max line was meant to be a completely adult comic books, most notably where Jessica Jones debuted in Alias on November 2001, created by Brian Michael Bendis and Alex Malov. Creating a new superhero, Diamond, who was retconned into Marvel's history, at one point she was an Avenger, Jones is now an alcoholic private detective investigating her former superhero teammates. Despite this mature line, Joe Quesada set out to recruit teenage audiences, following Bill Jemas' mandate, who wanted books to reflect the tone of the popular Buffy the Vampire Slayer TV series. Jemas was also making negative news with his feud with writer Peter David about canceling Captain Marvel, a low-selling book that nevertheless had a rabid fan following. Jemas challenged him in the Youth Decide contest, in which he wrote Marvel, while Ron Zimmerman did Ultimate Adventures, and they competed against Captain Marvel over who sold better. The winners stayed published, while the other two would be canceled. Marvel ended up being a childish satire of the industry and universally panned, with both it and Ultimate Adventures losing to Captain Marvel in sales. Jemas would change the bet a few issues in, stating the loser would still get a pie to the face, but ultimately Marvel and Ultimate Adventures were canceled, with Captain Marvel continuing for another 25 issues. Despite this, Jemas did revive the Epic line in 2003 with the hope of bringing in top creators with copyright guarantees, along with getting new talent to work on lesser-known properties. However, Jemas eventually made too many enemies at the company and was forced out of Marvel in 2004. On January 1st, 2005, Mike Perlmutter became the new CEO of Marvel Comics and most hands-on in recent years, with strict management style with the AVA forced to play damage control. He would scrap risky comic book proposals such as the Princess Diana comic, while firing writers thinking he would do a better job himself. This management interference led to Grant Morrison to leave for DC. Then, in a shocking move, Marvel Comics wouldn't have a booth at the San Diego Comic-Con in 2005, the first time in decades. Nevertheless, there were some bright spots, such as the recruitment of Joss Whedon, the creator of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, to write Astonishing X-Men in 2004, with John Cassaday doing the art. In the series, he brought back Katie Price, resurrected Colossus, and changed the costumes back to more cartoony ones. Whedon would complain about continuity hampering his writing, though. Meanwhile, Marvel was about to embark on one of its most daring moves to date when Avi Arad and David Maisel crafted a new Marvel Studios from a $525 million loan from Merrill Lynch, this time with the aim of making the movie adaptations themselves, thus allowing Marvel to keep all the money. It only got $10 million from Spider-Man in 2002. As collateral, the movie rights to the characters of Ant-Man, the Avengers, Black Panther, Captain America, Cloak and Dagger, Hawkeye, Nick Fury, Doctor Strange, the Power Pack, and Shang-Chi were put up, a daring move. Initially, Marvel sought a distribution deal with Universal, who still had the rights to Namor and the Hulk, but then went to Paramount when that fell through. They did get the film rights to the Hulk back, in exchange for Universal having distribution rights to any solo Hulk movie, along with Iron Man's rights from New Line Cinemas. However, as soon as they were set up, Arad clasped with how to release the films and the strength of the characters selected with Maisel. Ike Perlmutter sided with Maisel, leading to Arad to be bought out for $59 million. David Maisel was named the chairman of Marvel Studios, with Kevin Feige, Arad's former second-in-command, named president of co-productions on March of 2007. On May 2, 2008, Iron Man was released to huge critical acclaim and financial success, eventually grossing $585.2 million worldwide against a $140 million budget, showing that the plan was starting to pay off. Most daring, in an after-credits scene, Tony Stark meets Nick Fury, played by Samuel L. Jackson, as envisioned by Mark Miller and Brian Hitch back in The Ultimates, who wants to discuss the Avengers Initiative. Iron Man wasn't just a standalone film, but part of a larger cinematic universe that would soon include Thor and Captain America in 2011. This also led to the Marvel's The Avengers on May 4th, 2012, which would be one of the most successful movies of all time, grossing $1.5 billion worldwide against a $220 million budget. Throughout them all, Stan Lee made a cameo in each one, becoming a trademark of the MCU, along with that after-credits scene, much to the chagrin of movie theater employees, who now have to wait till after the credits are over to start cleaning the theaters. As a former movie theater employee myself, I'm glad I missed this phase of movies. It did lead to the creators starting to sue again, with many settling, including the Kirby family, much of it due to Marvel's new owner, Disney. Disney bought Marvel on December 31st, 2009 for $4 billion. Reportedly, this arose in an executive meeting in which the company discussed the problem of having to pay Marvel millions in licensing fees for cartoons like Wolverine and the X-Men, which were nonetheless their most popular shows in their channels like Disney XD. Then one executive asked, "Why don't we just buy Marvel?" Sure enough, the wheels started turning, leading to the House of Ideas joining the House of Mouse. Of interesting note, Stan Lee always wished for Marvel to be like Disney, eventually having theme parks in their own TV channels. The move did benefit Marvel, as it was now part of a larger corporation to protect it during the downtimes, as Warner Brothers did for DC during the speculation crash. Along with getting new and old properties, as when Disney bought Lucasfilms in 2013, the rights to Star Wars comics naturally reverted back to Marvel after being held at Dark Horse for nearly 2 decades, with the first Star Wars Marvel's comic books being published in 2015. The benefits to Disney were as obvious as well, as Marvel films quickly became the highest grossing in the company's history, along with Disney finally breaking into the young male market. Back on the comics front, the Ultimate line of comics was brought to an end as part of the Secret Wars miniseries of 2015, which did see the character of Miles Morales, the new Ultimate Spider-Man, being brought into the regular Marvel Universe. Created by Brian Michael Bendis and Sarah Pacelli in The Ultimate Fallout number 4 in August of 2011, he quickly became a fan favorite, as even getting his own animated movie, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, from Sony, set to be released in December of 2018. And that is where Marvel Comics is today, part of the larger Walt Disney Corporation. The movies and TV shows were still successful. Avengers Infinity War originally grossed $2 billion worldwide, while the comics still ruled the stands. Now that is part of the Disney Corporation, that is likely to continue for a long time to come, as like Warner Brothers is to DC, it has a larger corporate company to protect it. It has been a crazy and wild ride for the company, which today remains the premier comic book company in America. I would like to thank my chief source for these episodes, the excellent Marvel Comics, The Untold Stories by Sean Howe, a superb history on the company that is a must-read for any comic book fan.
Look, we gotta talk.
Yeah, Thunder Talk.
We're going all kinds of sideways with that sweet nerd junk.
Woke nerd junk.
It's topical.
Political.
Dare I say radical.
We've got all your latest news and reviews.
Hot music.
And a whole lot of comedy. But it ain't for kids.
Definitely mature content.
So let's talk.
Let's talk Thunder Talk.
Thunder Talk is a proud member of the ESO Network.
And now is September 19th, 2024. Time for, well, no comic book because I'm actually pre-recording this episode as I'm currently on vacation at Halloween Horror Nights in Orlando, Florida, having a good spooky time. If you're down here already, you might have already seen me. I'm wearing a very bad tacky shirt. I'm also wearing a hat because my hairline, not good for Florida sun. So, but having a little spooky time. I did want to leave you with some kind of review. I did recently watch the Spy Family Code White movie that came out earlier this year and is now streaming on Crunchyroll. We can also stream the entire series. This is a great movie, one of the best animes that's come out in recent memory. About the concept is kind of like a take on the Cold War, where this spy infiltrates this country, and in order to keep up his guys, he has to have a wife and a kid to move around, but the woman he marries is an assassin that he doesn't know about, and the girl he adopts is a telepath, and she knows that both her adopted dad is a spy, her adopted mom is an assassin. I think it's the coolest thing ever, and the hilarious anime spiral hijinks ensue. Just a lot of fun. Great, and also kind of heartwarming too, because it's kind of like you're seeing this weird family come together in the craziest way. They kind of actually do care about each other as the story goes on. But in the movies, it's a lot of fun. Just definitely check it out. That's my recommendation while I'm on vacation. But till then, hopefully everyone's having a good time. I know I'm having a good time at Halloween Horror Nights. But go out and enjoy a good comic book, and if you can, which also includes, hey, check out the manga Spy Family as well, and check out that anime. It's a really great time.